Why are you poor? You go and work 1, 2, 3 jobs. You come home, you have enough to pay the bills and barely enough to even eat. Why are you poor, ladies and gentlemen? Let me explain to you why you are poor as I read this to you, because this says it very well. I'm not always very well spoken, but when I find something like this that really illustrates to you and shows you why it is that something is happening and why it is that you don't understand why it's happening, I have to share with you, because one of the first parts of awakening is understanding that the system is not there for you. Let me stop talking and let me read this on. It's not a long article whatsoever. I've talked about this before. I believe I talked about it in my previous video. The greatest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the elites in history. When do you think that was? Recent history is punctuated with a lot of not so great economic greats, from the Great Depression to the Great Recession. Now we have a new one. When historians look back on the decisions made beginning in March of 2020, remember what I always tell you, that the consequences of the decisions that are made on your behalf by your elected officials, you are the ones that have to live with those consequences and not them. And still going strong, this period will be remembered as the Great Consolidation, the acceleration of a historic wealth transfer and power concentration out of the hands of the middle class and into those with political power and connections. That is why you are poor, ladies and gentlemen, because you are not in the club, right? Just like George Carlin used to say, it's a great big club, but guess what? You ain't in it. The connected from a powerful bloc comprised of big government, big business, and big special interests. And though their monikers label them big, they are comprised of relatively small elites. And they are seeking to use their power to benefit themselves at your expense. I mentioned insider trading by members of Congress and the Senate on my previous videos, and that is them enriching themselves at your expense. Prior to the health crisis, more than 30 million small businesses accounted for about half of the GDP and jobs in America. The other half of the economy was concentrated in 20,000 big companies. So you might have expected that small businesses would have had an equal amount of negotiating power when this health crisis hit, as big companies did. You were wrong. Big companies have more lobbying dollars and more connections, and thus more ability to play the political game. Their big pockets are balanced with a small enough scope to make them a government ally, compared to the highly decentralized small business landscape. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what distinguishes capitalism from crony capitalism. All right? People say capitalism is terrible. No, capitalism is freedom. Capitalism is if I'm selling something at a certain price and you want to buy it, you can freely make that trade with me. That is capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. It's freedom. Crony capitalism, which is what most people confuse capitalism with, is when businesses get in bed with politicians, when corporations get in bed with politicians, when politicians are crooked and they sell you, their constituents, out for a dollar bill. That is crony capitalism, because it enables them to make regulations, to make laws, to change laws that would in order benefit those big corporations that are lining their pockets instead of yours, their constituents. As a result, big firms were deemed essential, imagine that, and allowed to stay open during the health crisis, while small businesses were subjected to punishing lockdown orders and forced to close, in part or completely. Many of the examples were doubly infuriating, given the absurd hypocrisies they presented. For example, big box retailers like PetSmart, for all things, ladies and gentlemen, PetSmart, that groomed pet hair and nails were deemed essential, while salons owned by small business owners that served human beings were not deemed essential. Are you waking up if you're not awake? This is why you're poor. This is why you are poor. This is why you are struggling to stay on that first rung of the ladder, to just keep a roof over your head, to keep food on the table, to hopefully have enough money to put in your gas tank so you can get to that slave job that you have. The LA area Pineapple Hill Salon and Grill was forced to close their outdoor dining, while a movie production not only operated but hosted a catering tent serving food to crew in the same parking lot that the restaurant had been forced to abandon. Weed dispensaries, illegal just a handful of years ago in many jurisdictions, were suddenly deemed essential. And the results of this are fairly easy to follow. Spending that couldn't be done at closed businesses was shifted to the ones that were open. You understand that? So they closed the small businesses, the mom and pop shops. They left the big businesses open. Well, people still need stuff. People still needed stuff during that health crisis, right? So where would they spend their money? They had to spend it in the big box stores that were left open. Where did you spend your stimulus money? Not mom and pop shops, not the corner bodega if you live in the city. So continuing on, spending that couldn't be done at closed businesses was shifted to the ones that were open, which were by and large big businesses, many of which naturally saw a substantial increase in their revenue. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve was pumping trillions of dollars into the markets, helping to inflate the stock valuations. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses were murdered in just a few short months by government edict, which is not law. While 7 tech companies gained $3.4 trillion in market value. This is why you're poor. If you were able to access capital, which is code for already being big or wealthy, even if you weren't in some cases financially sound, it was plentiful, and for debt capital available at historically low interest rates. 2020 became a record year for IPOs and for other capital raising vehicles like special purpose acquisition companies, and some of this capital was likely used to compete with your local small business. So pretty much the capital, the money that was available to be loaned out during that time, was available to people that did not need it because they were taking it out for very cheap interest rates. Well, the small businesses couldn't get that capital because they weren't operating and a bank would not lend to them. But big businesses could, and could get it very cheaply. And they used that capital to do what? To compete against your closed small business. The 1-2 punch of government fiscal and Fed monetary policy continued to destroy the fabric of the economy for the average American. It dislocated the labor markets and the supply chain, and it has ultimately led to inflation, which is making the basic cost of living much more expensive for Americans all across the country. This is why you're poor. And it's all planned. The middle class has to go away. Do you understand that? They are going to make you more poor than what you are now. Why aren't you preparing for this? In short, while your dollars today purchase fewer goods and services and your lives are more expensive and disrupted, those who are well connected and asset rich benefited from outsized wealth increases driven by government policy. This all leads to fewer wealth creation opportunities for everyday Americans. It is harder and riskier to start and own a business. It is more challenging to save money. And when you do, you are facing inflated asset prices and more risk to earn what you would normally be considered an appropriate return. So pretty much saying that even if you do have a little bit of money in savings, it's not going to get you much. Because how much interest is your bank paying you in savings? So if you do want to get ahead, you're going to have to gamble. You're going to have to gamble with your money in the stock market. And the stock market is nothing but a big casino, ladies and gentlemen. And there's no end in sight. There are new proposals backed by the Treasury Secretary to report on the inflows and outflows of bank accounts. And this is last year. The first proposal was $600 threshold, and the latest is a $10,000 threshold. Of course, with exemptions for those connected to influential unions like teachers. There is also a proposal to hire 87,000 new agents. These proposals are being sold as a way to ensure billionaires pay their fair share. Where have we heard that before? But given that there are fewer than 1,000 billionaires in the US, the estimate is between 600 and 800. And with legislation going into effect for 1099-K reporting at hobby sites like eBay and Etsy, it should be clear that they are coming after the middle class. So they have to hire 87,000 new agents in order to look after less than 1,000 billionaires, because they're going after the billionaires, right, ladies and gentlemen? No, they're not. They're going after you. They're going after the average American. They want to drain us of everything. We all have to be poor. We all have to be equal in equity, meaning equal in what we own. The trillions of dollars being sought for infrastructure and social spending are also by and large a cash grab that would benefit those connected and potentially create further inflation, perhaps even combined with slower growth. There is nothing that seeks to expand wealth creation opportunities and make it easier for the middle class in America to thrive. It's no more than a cloak for promises that will ultimately lead to further wealth creation barriers. Consolidation of the economy only benefits those in the club. And even though it will likely destroy prosperity, the power-hungry often don't care. Big businesses benefit from the decimation of competition. Special interests benefit from favors granted by big government, and big government benefits by having these powerful consolidated allies to keep its power and purview growing. And listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. This is 100% right. The only antidote is decentralization, which means supporting small businesses and the middle class through smaller government and the removal of the barriers to wealth creation. What in the world happened to America, where once we used to be a republic, a country of laws, where we had law of the land, where the law for government was to create laws that would protect we the people from government, instead of creating laws that would protect government from we the people. As Ayn Rand said, we are doomed as a society. Government is so big today that they do whatever they want and they don't care who knows it. And more you see government officials come out and blatantly say, we are going to do what we want, no matter what. This, ladies and gentlemen, is why you are poor.